Hi, everybody. I'm Creasman. I'm the current president of the Faculty Association here for Valencia. I'm joined by Dr. Shugart here. We decided this year for Academic Assembly, we were going to have a guest speaker. And so to provide more time for that and also to allow for there to be some afternoon activities, that we were going to sit together and have a conversation about some of the questions. As many of you know, in the afternoon or the second part of Academic Assembly, Dr. Shugart often answers questions, Q&A style, that come from the audience. So I've tried to put together a list of questions. Hopefully I haven't left anything out, but that we could come to you with. So good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
Doing well?
Yeah, it's a hot and wet summer like everybody else is experiencing, but looking forward to the fall. And if we don't cover all the questions people have here, they can email me, call me, buttonhole me in the hall. I enjoy the give and take, the spontaneous back and forth, and it's hard to know what people are wondering about. So ask away. I should say I haven't previewed the questions, and there's no script, so ask away, and we'll do the best we can.
Okay. So we just finished, as you know, or last year we finished the QEP, and that led us to our next big idea, which is the new student experience. And I thought that'd be a good place to kind of start. Christina Harding and the team have been working diligently this summer. But can you give us any update yourself on kind of what you've heard from them or how you think that's rolling out, the progress that they've been making? Have you got any update from the team there?
I think one of the most significant projects in Valencia's portfolio that's related to our long student-centered and learning-centered journey is the new student experience. And it's been several years in the making. In many ways, it grew out of the Foundations of Excellence review we did, that was nearly 5 years ago.
Right.
And faculty have been in conversation about what to do with that information about what students really experience in their earliest encounters with Valencia ever since, and been building on that. We had the opportunity to connect that conversation to our accreditation process, which requires you to choose a QEP, as you know. So it's a full-fledged strategy to connect much more powerfully with our students in ways that help them plan for, engage, and succeed in college from the very first day. And there are several key components to that that most of the faculty would know. Most importantly, is the creation of a freshman seminar for 3 credit hours called the New Student Experience that builds on experience we've had with other courses in the past, but it really is a new course. And they are to, every incoming new student will take this class eventually. We start this fall, and by next fall we think we'll be at scale to be able to make that claim. And in that they will do some processes of discerning what they're here to do, what their purpose in college is, what the pathway is they need to follow, what plan they need to have to follow that pathway, what persons they need to connect to stay on that path successfully, and how to navigate all the way through to whatever destination they're seeking that we can provide a bridge to. Meanwhile, they'll also get a lot of orientation. They'll learn about resources the college has to support them and so on. So here's where we are. We're staffing up. The course has been designed, the job description for the faculty for that's been developed.
We just hired nine new annually contracted faculty to bring them into the team, correct?
9 new, 2 or 3 were already working in the college in another course that we offered for student success, and they're a part of that team. We'll hire at least another 9 for next year, so that'll be 18 in a core faculty, and they'll be unlike any of the other faculty in the college.
Right, this is a big issue here. I think the fact that their description involves the advising piece and a kind of a higher level than, say, what I do when I advise my students, but
exactly.
It's a little bit deeper. Can you go in maybe a little bit more there?
Yeah, nearly all faculty engage in some kind of advising with their students. Most of it's informal, and we don't capture a record of it and those sorts of things. But it tends to be mostly around things that are discipline related. So, you know, a chemistry faculty member advising a student about a major STEM major or something like that. But what we lack in our large-scale institutions is a personal connection at the very beginning of the program that we can sustain for a period of time until the student's really navigating independently. And we think connecting this course experience and the person that guides them through it to advising for the first stages of their experience at Valencia are just essential. So this will be a faculty role that's both a teaching role and formally an advising role. And my deepest hope is that we'll invent this as we go along together in a way that students have a deep personal connection to somebody they can depend on until they're in a position to be pretty independent.
So it's in flux. I mean, it's a pilot. This is year 2, correct, of the 5 years?
Yeah, I would say we're in scaling. We're not piloting anymore. We're scaling it up. But you do fine-tune things as you scale up. So those 9 faculty and some others were involved in a deep training and collaborative experience this summer. They're ready to go. They're already advising, in fact, this summer prior to the fall semester beginning. And we'll tweak it as we go along together.
Right. Well, that was the point I guess I was getting at, that they'll be shaping as we go along, because we are kind of inventing a new, at least as far as this group's concerned, almost a new faculty role. Their 12-month contract, not the 10-month like I am.
That's right. And their content expertise is different. Their process expertise is different. But they're going to be, I think, immensely influential on new students and help us to get them in the right pathway and keep them there. It's not meant to handhold exactly. We're not coddling students. We're guiding students. So it's more like a guide through the wilderness. But once you get into the wilderness and begin to know rock from tree, you have to assume some responsibility for yourself. So this is moving from being fairly institution dependent for your guidance to very independent, and these are the agents who are going to help our students get there.
So one more question on this then. By what metric are we measuring? I mean, again, as I understood it, it's still like a 5-year plan that we will evaluate and see, was it successful, with, I guess, the potential, at least in my mind, if it's not successful, we're going to need to adapt or maybe do something different completely. But so what metric are we going to measure?
Like all of our big initiatives, this is, it's not a pilot, it's a project at scale, but they're all subject to evaluation as well. So on the front end in the QEP, they defined a number of metrics that we assess this by. I won't go into all the details, but there are things you'd be familiar with. That's right. There are things you're familiar with, like success in gateway courses, choice of major, persistence from term to term, and ultimately degree completion.
Okay. Well, creating the new student experience came out of our governance process. And Kurt Ewing and Christina Harden and Landon Shepard and a whole series of our peers worked for, gosh, almost 2 years working through that process. But as you know, this past year, also a 2 or 3 year process, we've redesigned our governance process. So you've actually unveiled a video for that already that hopefully people have taken a chance to watch. On the Faculty Association side, we're talking about like how we do staffing for that. I know Amy Bosley and Dr. Susan Ledlow are working on the new Learning Leadership Council. So not the specifics of that, because that's available to everybody else, but as you think about kind of a new governance system, what are your hopes and dreams maybe? What are you seeing as maybe some of the challenges that we have as we move into a new governance system?
Good questions. You know, when we invented the governance system we've used for the past 15 years almost, Valencia was about half the size it is now.
Right, that's
it had fewer campuses. We're about to add one more campus in Point Siena and probably one downtown. We already have property for one out west. So we're, before very long, going to have 9 or 10 campuses. And so the model that really was around 3 or 4 locations has gotten infinitely more complex. And you know, we're into a lot more work. So what I heard strongly from people as we evaluated the old governance system was, we liked it, but it's hard to feel connected to it. We want to be one Valencia, but we want to have campus flavors. That's a little bit nuanced. We want to be clear about who's making what decisions and how we engage if we want to influence that decision. We want to feel more agency in the organization. We want to be able to ignore it if that's something we need to do for a time and know that it's in trustworthy hands. We want to know that collaboration is still a core value here, but that decisions are being made in a timely way and in a transparent way. All those were aspirations people expressed to us. So I spent the better part of a year visiting campuses in small groups and large groups and listening and designing together what this was all about. And then we produced this somewhat simplified model. Here's my hope for it, that the spirit of collaboration is preserved. And remember, collaboration isn't about necessarily consensus or making everybody happy. It's about getting the right people in the room to make the best decision you can make. And that means people who have to implement the decision need to be in the room when you're designing the solution. And secondly, building trust, that the motives and the processes we go through are real, authentic. They're not window dressing. This is really where the decisions are made. And so the system we've designed is aimed at that. And you asked what my hopes were. My hope is that we'll be able to both raise the engagement of people in the big decisions in the college, and at the same time gain speed, because the world's moving faster and it's hard for us to keep up if we don't find better ways to make decisions where people feel connected and engaged and got heard and had their input, but it didn't take 2 years to make a decision that we needed to make in 6 months.
Right. When you say, and what was the phrase you used, raise the engagement?
Yes.
Flesh that out a little bit more. What does that actually mean in your mind?
Well, we have a lot of people working here.
We do.
And that means we have a lot of stakeholders and a lot of sources of intelligence.
Yes.
And we need them to be engaged in the decision-making process. And you know, it's okay for a season for say a tenured faculty member to say, I'm really busy right now, I've got a book pending and I'm rewriting all my courses, so just leave me alone. It's okay to do that for a season. But one of the reasons we have tenured faculty is because we need their voice at the table for designing the future of the college. It's curriculum, it's learning experiences, it's assessment protocols, but even things that seem far away from the faculty's day-to-day interests, like how we interact with the community, what our legislative program is, those kinds of things. So I would dearly love to see faculty feel a deep sense of agency, that my voice can be heard. I can be heard by my dean and in my department. I can be heard at my senate and know that they're going to do something productive with it. I can be heard at the faculty council and the faculty association level. But most importantly, the real work of the college, which is done by collaborative work teams across those roles, faculty, administrators, staff, and so on, has a high level of engagement and participation among faculty and staff. Because that's where the solutions are designed, not in the governance councils or committees, but in those work teams.
So some of my peers would say, yeah, that's just all window dressing, that collaboration thing. It's not real, or it's just things you say so that you know, you'll do what you want to do anyway. So what would you say back to them? I would say for myself, everybody else knows, I don't find that to be true. I find the work that I've been involved with on multiple levels, both with yourself and other people, that as the stakeholders, whoever they may be, contribute to the conversation, change is made, alteration happens. But nonetheless, I mean, just very recently, I had somebody tell me that very thing. So is there a statement back you would say to someone who would just say, I think that's just all window dressing, I don't think you're really serious about collaboration?
I'd say come and see. Most of the time when I hear that concern, and it's, you know, I understand that concern, and I certainly have experienced it from the other end in organizations as well. But I'm not hearing it from people who've been involved in the work. And if I was, I'd be really worried that our, you know, our conversation and our actions were not the same. But we're not going to fail sometimes. We're not going to collaborate well at times. We're going to skip a step. We're going to fail to listen to somebody we should have heard. Nobody's perfect. So I'd say come and see, get involved. Right. If you're involved and you still feel that way, if you're really contributing and you don't feel like you're being heard, I want to hear that. If you're not involved and you just feel like, well, those things are, as a general skeptic, are never real, then I'd say come get involved. Find out for yourself.
I feel like that kind of plays to definitions, which is kind of a personal interest of mine. When people use words, then it's like, let's define that. A word I think that would be helpful if we heard at least your take on it is this idea of representation. Because we all are very large. So there's 500 plus faculty just alone for them, not counting everybody else who's a part of an employee group. So we ask for a work team, and we might need 2 or 3 people. So I'm going to be represented by these 2 or 3 people in this group, in this work team, and doing the collaborative work. When you ask or have you know the team is asking for representation, what do you think that means to yourself? What do you think, what should it mean for us, not just us, the faculty, but anybody at Valencia when they're contributing? Sometimes we have career staff stepping in to represent their employee class. What are you hoping they do? What are you hoping they don't do? Are there any thoughts about representation you could share with us?
Well, it is a loaded word, and I don't use it very often. I don't think of our work as representative work.
Okay.
That tends to suggest to me more the sort of voting behaviors of governmental organizations and so on. And what I found is that the larger, more complex your work gets, the more alienated people feel from all that process. And I think we're at a low ebb of trust in representative government right now, maybe, just because of our national culture.
Yeah.
So, I understand skepticism about that. To me, the engagement is still the better word than representation.
Okay.
I can't do everything, but I can be engaged enough to know what's going on and to know who's doing it and to know if I have a concern, who to go talk to. So one of the things we've put into this governance process is project tracking tools so that people can follow the big decisions in the college and say, I care about that, but I can't be there. I can still follow the dialogue, and I can interact with the people who are there, who understand my point of view, other faculty, other staff, whoever that might be. The core of this is that a culture of advocacy, I represent a group or a special interest, is what actually paralyzes us. A culture of inquiry that requires a certain amount of trust, but also pretty high standards of argumentation and evidence. A culture of inquiry moves you forward. It takes you someplace instead of paralyzing you. So, anybody that feels like this is a conversation I need to connect to, I want them to connect, but I want them to connect with the spirit of inquiry that says, tell me more about what you're doing. Right. Why are you thinking this way? Let me show you another way of thinking about it. What do you think of my way? Rather than, I'm here to represent an interest group, and I'm going to beat you over the head with my interests, and you're going to beat me over the head with your interests, and neither one of us is going to go home happy.
Right. And at the end of the day, the work team still has to produce a product that if I'm not on that work team, need to have some level of trust that the people at the team, at the table, did their work and that we're doing the best we can. And that was one of the things I know came up at the last summer's governance retreat, was kind of a definition for shared governance, but a part of that at least was that we're good people trying to do, meaning everybody who works at Valencia, good people trying to do the work, and I've got to learn to trust that.
I think we have a pretty high trust environment in that regard. People are generally distrustful of institutions, and large-scale institutions especially. And, Dilbert's not the most popular comic strip in the world for nothing, and we all get that. But they also tend to make exceptions for their own experience. So,
sure.
Big organizations, big turnoff, but mine's pretty good. Or big organization, big turnoff, but in my department it's okay. Or, whatever it might be. I would just say that we have an extraordinary experience here. I visit 50, 60 colleges a year, speaker, consultant, whatever, conference. And what we have is pretty special, and it's worth stewarding. The level of trust, the level of mutuality and dialogue is at a pretty high level here, and we ought to treasure it and work to keep it that way.
Yeah, I agree. It's a special place. So let's talk about how special it is. Talking about distrusting governance, let's talk about our state funding.
Yeah.
So this past year, the board courageously adopted a small tuition increase, which then allowed them, through our work with Keith and the rest of the senior team, to adopt a budget that is aimed at trying to do things like the new student experience, a raise for employees. But our governance system, for as long as I've been here, I've heard that we don't get funded well relative to the state funding. And there's some desires to make some changes there. So I know you are obviously, as one of the college presidents within the system, deeply involved there. So is there anything you can tell us about that? Anything you can share about your hopes or challenges or things you're trying to employ so that we don't find ourselves in this consistent place where we could do more excellent work in protecting the beautiful thing we have here, but the state doesn't seem to want to fund us?
Well, we're coming out of a recession. And I understand that the state's revenues were severely constrained. The budget is not quite back in terms of total revenues to where it was in 2007. And I understood, and most people would understand, that as the revenues come back, education's a priority, but it may not be the highest priority. It may be that children without health care coverage is a little ahead of us, or overcrowded prisons a little ahead of us. So I didn't expect money to come rushing back into our coffers as soon as someone declared the recession was over. It's a slow recovery, but we're recovering, and state budgets are improving. I was disappointed this year because I thought the state had the capacity to fund a budget increase of $60 to $70 million to our system, and we ended up with just over $30 million. all three houses, meaning the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, initial proposals for our budgets were higher than that.
Wow.
And it was a tough session, and I wasn't a leader in it. I was a player, but I have no formal leadership role for that. And I think the system as a whole did not do very well. And part of that is that we got sidetracked into a set of issues raised in the Senate about our mission, the offering of bachelor's degrees, and a real argument between what I would call an elite view of higher education and a populist view of higher education. And some key Senate leaders, I think, took the former position and said, you guys hang on, we need 1 or 2 or 3 flagship universities, and we're going to spend a lot of money to get there. So they were pushing to invest in that direction. Nevertheless, what the state did is what the state did. The board did show great courage. Remember, they are all appointed by the governor. The governor had lectured all of them on the importance of keeping tuition as low as possible, and they were able to pass a small tuition increase. I think the year of annual tuition increases, the age of that is probably past, and we're going to see real care in the board with regard to when and how much we raise tuition. We remain very affordable. We are something like just under $2,500 a year for a truly full-time student, 15 hours a semester for 2 semesters. That's all good. We're a bargain, but the board's very sensitive to it, and I appreciate that sensitivity. So we were able to really push hard, and there was a combination of things, Carl. First, the college did yet another great job of stewardship. So we had resources that we could free up to help. We had the tuition dollars that the board made available to us, and our enrollment and our tuition revenue did not go down as much in this past year as we thought it would. And that's also good work by the staff and faculty. I think we're about to turn the corner, and shortly we'll see enrollment increases. I hope they're modest. 10% increases a year is hard to service. 3% I could live with.
Yes.
And that gives you some marginal resources to work with. I'm hopeful for next year. I am very involved for the coming 2 years because the incoming president of the Senate is a local senator, and the incoming Speaker of the House is a local House member. Okay. Both are friends, both are colleagues, both understand and know Valencia well, and both have invited my input into their planning. And as a result of that, the system has asked me to help lead the systems effort. And I would love for both the system and Valencia to do well together.
Sure.
And that's what I'm working on.
Great. Is there anything that an individual who works here, who again believes in our mission, loves the school, that we could do on our own time, right, from our own computers, on our own paper, right, at home? Is there somebody we could write? Is there somebody we could call as our local representatives? Is there something that you would say we should not do to just want to say, hey, fix the funding? Or I mean, I don't know the correct way to say it, but to be involved in the system involves participating.
Yes, there's always more you can do. Some of you know legislators because they're your neighbors, or your kids go to karate together, or whatever the issue might be. Keep them informed that Valencia is operating as the most efficient college in Florida, both from cost, the total student cost and the total state cost, the cost per degree, the square foot per degree, the square foot per FTE, the cost per FTE. Any measure you want to put on us, we're the most efficient college in Florida. Particularly when you include performance in your measurement of efficiency, and that's a useful thing for them to know. I think engagement for them is really important. One of the reasons that Valencia and some of the other metropolitan institutions have been overlooked is that we're one of maybe 30 chicks in the nest.
Right.
And so when a legislature is thinking about their priorities, they have to spread it thinly across many priorities in the metropolitan areas. If you're in some little rural hamlet and you're a college in the Panhandle, you're the college, and you're about the only place they can bring bacon home to. So they tend to get a lot more attention from the legislators they have when they're in power. And that's led to some real inequities, imbalances in the resources over the years. But I'm feeling good about the next 2, and we'll make all the hay we can while the sun's shining. Sure. And if you will engage legislators, so find a way to get them to guest lecture. Find a way for people who have voice in the community leaders, to have voice on campus. Get them to guest lecture, get them to visit, take your classes to visit them, find ways to engage. They need to know us better. And there's nothing like being on campus. It always amazes me when I bring an elected leader on any of our campuses that the scales kind of fall off and they realize this isn't what I thought it was.
Right. Well, the more we can do to be involved in our own community would certainly seem to build advocates within the community as they vote and think and communicate themselves. So, yeah, good. So we talk about the money, though, of the budget. A lot of times it feels like enrollment is all that matters, or enrollment's a huge issue because we are now, is it 60-40? We're funded more from our students than we are from the state. That's change that we've done. I mean, that's come to us from the state. There's pressures, it seems like there. You were talking about enrollment being too high, or not too high, but 10%'s a lot to deal with.
Growing too fast or declining, or there are issues. There's a ditch on both sides of the road, son, as my old uncle used to say. So let me say a couple things about enrollment. One is, those of you who know me here for 15 years know that enrollment's not a goal for me. Learning is the goal. Learning's what we're about. Enrollment is a business outcome. It's a necessary thing, growing our enrollment so we have resources to invest in the learning mission. But it's only a means to an end. You know, it indicates something about access, but once you're huge, I'm not sure how much it tells you.
Okay.
The most important thing is that students have a powerful learning experience and that they persist to complete their degrees. Growing our enrollment is just one way to provide the resources to invest in the best faculty, the best staff, the best systems to make sure that happens. So it's important to keep it straight. Secondly, we make 1,000 decisions today about all sorts of things that affect the student experience. I would hope that that the touchstone, the test of those decisions isn't will this drive enrollment or not. It's got to be, again, about the quality of experience the students have. Does that mean we never consider enrollment in any decision? No, of course not. It's a business outcome we have to pay attention to. But I wouldn't want folks to wake up in the morning thinking enrollment's what the college is all about. I know many college presidents who are really proud to announce their growth every year as though they had accomplished something, and I just don't feel that way.
Well, good. I'm glad. I will say at times it does feel like enrollment ends up being the thing that gets talked about a lot, and so it's tough at times because you do. I've said sort of all cards on the table. You know, it feels like enrollment's king, and when enrollment's king, then learning's not, and so it's a challenge. But there is the business side of the balance that there is a funding issue. So I'm glad to hear you say that, and hopefully we can keep pressing on that regard. Sticking with the state. So we did get some good news. The state gave us $1 million for campus.
That's right.
So can you talk a little bit more about that campus? Then maybe we'll talk about some of the other growth areas that we're looking at from a building location.
The Poinciana campus has rapidly become a really high priority for the college
district. It's moved
district.
faster than normal, right?
Well, you know, sort of sitting out there knowing we were going to do something about it someday. But when the county approached us and said, we may have a site for you that we could make available to you either inexpensively or free, and then others came in and said, we have sites too, that kind of raised it on the agenda. And as the Osceola campus under Dr. Plinsky's leadership has engaged the school district with Gott College and other initiatives that are aimed at significantly raising the educational aspirations and attainment of people who live in Osceola County, that opened the door to say maybe it's timely for us to create more access to students who happen to live in that Poinciana area, which is a long drive from our campus on 192 at Denjon. So here's what's happened. By the time this airs, a site will have been identified. In fact, next week I'll make the recommendation to the board on that site, and they will have picked a site. The money is there to start our planning, and the planning has already begun. We are positioning as our highest capital priority in the budget the first wave of construction dollars. It'll probably take 2 years to get all the construction dollars together if we're successful. So that means we're not breaking ground for a couple of years, but we'll be planning programs and beginning to add some sections in facilities that are already available to us in Poinciana and growing the enrollment down there.
Kind of like we did Lake Nona, right? We were in the Lake Nona High School for a while.
Just like that, that's right. So the TICO has a facility they want us to share. We're already in Liberty High School, so there's opportunities to do that. And we'll be building our relationships with the school district, and including with Polk, who has approached us. They have students who live near the county line there in the other part of Poinciana, and through my agreement with the Polk State College president, we'll be able to serve them as well.
Oh, that's good.
So we're working out those details, and we should be out of the ground in 2.5 years and open for business in about 4.
It is a long drive, though. So I mean, it's 2 years away, maybe, because we will. Staffing and there's probably not an answer for this now, but I mean, are there plans in place already? Is Dr. Plenty going to remain the president over Poinciana, or are you not able to talk about those things yet? I mean, it's a long drive down there, like you said, even from our Osceola campus.
Yeah, it's not so far that I think we need another president to live down there, but it'll be like our model of area campuses, like Lake Nona, like Winter Park, like others will be. It will connect to the Osceola campus, okay. And so it'll probably have some sort of a dean or executive dean, site manager for it, and we'll see how it grows. Until I know the program plan, I can't tell you what the staffing pattern looks like, and we're still developing the program plan. That's Dr. Plensky's business. She'll bring a proposal to me. But that's not the only place where we might grow.
Right.
There's a big discussion about downtown Orlando that's also gotten on the front burner just recently. That's right. We've been in conversation about Creative Village with the city and others for 5 or 6 or 7 years, but it also has recently gotten momentum, and it's gotten that momentum from noticing how Phoenix and Arizona State University collaborated to solve Arizona State's problem of not enough land in Tempe, where it's located, and Phoenix's problem of not enough activity in downtown Phoenix. So they decanted whole schools from the university into downtown Phoenix, including student housing, and have about 15,000 students now in downtown Phoenix. And it's a little bit more lively place than it used to be.
Sure.
So that's now a part of the Creative Village vision, and maybe the early part of the vision coming true. Sort of anchor tenants in an education village, and then the rest of the commercial development follows that. So UCF and Valencia are already deep in conversation about that with the city and the legislature, and I think that's likely to get fast-tracked. So we're beginning to talk now about what makes sense for a Valencia presence downtown. And although no final decisions have been made, there are a number of programmatic areas that we're entertaining for that. Some to be completely moved downtown, and others to share downtown and existing campus presences.
Okay.
And those could include culinary arts and hospitality management, computer graphic arts, some of the creative arts in film and music recording, and even some of the fine arts, dance and theater and some other things. We're also really working hard to figure out how we connect that campus presence to the people who happen to live near downtown.
Sure.
Many of whom will never be served by UCF. So if they're to be served, they'll be served by us. And so you're talking about communities with very high unemployment rates and low education attainment rates and pretty high distrust of institutions.
Sure.
And figuring out how to penetrate those and serve them authentically is an important part of whatever our creative village looks like.
Is the footprint the old Amway Center?
There's 66 acres that includes the Amway Center and the parking around it, and to the south, all the way to the railroad line that runs out towards Lake Apopka from there, behind the old Expo Center, now called FIA. And the development includes a K-8 school on the western margins of it. It's got potential for lots of housing.
Is UCF going to consider putting student housing down there? Like
yes, and we will share in it, I think.
Wow.
So we will, I think their hope is to have as many as 1,000 students living in student housing facilities on the south end of that 66 acres soon after it opens. And I think some of those 1,000 students will be ours as well.
Would we manage it?
No, I think they're much better at both building and managing student housing than we.
Obviously.
So we would probably be the junior partner in that and let them be the senior partner.
But somehow our students possibly could be in line to get student housing, pay a student housing fee of some sort.
Yes, yeah, we'll partner to get that done, and they can live downtown and school downtown.
Are we going to join with UCF in building buildings like we've done here on the West Campus?
Yes.
And Osceola campus?
Both at West and Osceola have joint use facilities, and this is likely to be a joint use facility as well. In the case of Osceola and West, we own the facility and they co-financed it with us and cohabit it. In the case of downtown, probably it'd be better for them to own it and us co-finance, co-design, and cohabit it.
Okay. It's not the only campus, though. For years, I've heard you talk about the west side of town. We've never done anything there yet for various reasons. And then recently, there was some conversation about Apopka. Any quick update on those two locations?
I think Apopka's off the table. We've looked and looked.
Okay.
There's really a lot of energy and interest already in that area from both Lake Sumter and from Seminole. And I think our addition to that mix, even if property were offered to us, and there have been some sort of soft offers of property, just crowds the field in a place where we'd be duplicating and competing with each other when there's other places that need the services where there is no duplication. So I think our attentions in terms of the West has moved south to Ocoee Winter Garden and south of there down along the 545 corridor. We own land, have owned land there for some time. It's on the west side of the turnpike out there, the 429 and 545. And so we're in some pretty creative conversations to figure out with the developers who are developing the housing out there when there'll be enough rooftops to justify opening a facility, whether we open it on our land or maybe do some horse trading from land to get a different kind of location that would open earlier rather than later. I don't have any answers there. We just have conversations in long-term interest.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about security. Talking about building downtown. I mean, but all the campuses. I mean, we obviously all watch the news, and so it's obviously this is our new normal for our country relative to school violence or school issues. And we hired Paul Rooney to come join us, which I personally think has been a great thing. We also hired or I guess got a security consultant to work with us to some degree. Can you elaborate some on where that information is, a report on just the whole security thing?
Well, there have been a fair number of incidents reported in the national press, not just on higher education campuses, but a lot of places, schools, movie theaters. It's dreadful, the level of violence that seems now common in our country. Just the other day, there was a mass killing in Spring, Texas, which is my mailing address when we lived in Texas, and just about 3 miles north of the campus I led there years ago. I would say that all that notwithstanding, the first thing I want to say is you'd still statistically be very hard-pressed to find a safer place anywhere in America than a college or university campus, especially a solid community college like Valencia, so you're safe. The second is we take really seriously the potential threat, and the problem with these incidents is there's no threshold that's tolerable. Even one is too many, so you have to work really hard to prevent that. Third, when we brought this consultant in, it was to focus expressly on the sort of mass threat events. And the biggest threat to us actually is tornadoes and hurricanes. Second, that would probably be fire and other kinds of accidents. Mass shooters and that sort of stuff have to be dealt with, and so that was in the contract, but that's not really, if you do a realistic threat assessment, the main thing. And when that does occur on community college campuses, it's usually an incident that was off campus that somebody brought on campus, and that's worth knowing in your prevention models. Yes, we hired the retiring police chief, retiring at a young age, as they sometimes do, police chief of Orlando City Police, Paul Rooney. He's awesome, brilliant leader, deeply seasoned, not just in police work, but in community engagement, creating safety, not just good police work, but a safe environment, and has done many things that the press don't cover because they're not sensational, like door-to-door work in neighborhoods where people have needs and their needs were met through his efforts without any fanfare. Great guy. And I hope you all get to know him and work with him. The consultant's work, again, was to give us models for communication and mitigation of risk during big incidents. And that's been done, and many of those incidents have now been tabletop modeled. So, we practice in theory what might happen. And there have even been a few at scale, sort of live experiments now with how you evacuate buildings, when you evacuate buildings. You have to keep up with that because the models that are recommended to us over time have changed. It used to be, no matter what happened, you just shelter in place. Now there are models that say that's probably not the best thing in some of the circumstances, and so we have other models of mitigating risk. Excuse me. Our safety statistics, by the way, are a matter of public record and available to every faculty and staff member. We file those every year with the federal government, and they're available online, and I'd encourage you to go get them. And look, if you're wondering about your campus, it'll tell you about every crime that was reported. Right. Meanwhile, I've asked Chief Rooney to do his own thorough assessment of the day-to-day ordinary risks in the college and make recommendations about how to strengthen security here. And he's well into that. And I'm sure would welcome feedback from anybody in the college. But we've already had discussions about strengthening both the presence of sworn law enforcement officers on our campuses at certain times and places, and the image and reality of what our private security, our own security officers are able to do, and the sort of profile they cut on campus, where they spend their time, knowing where the riskiest areas are and being present there rather than someplace else, managing the mix of officers by hour of day and location and so on. So it's a big enterprise, and I think he's just exactly the right guy to lead that.
Good. So, and he's going to be bringing probably more information as the fall unfolds with changes or new things that he's embarking on. Or
I think so. He makes his first briefing to the board, his sort of preliminary assessment of where we are next week. So here we are in the middle of July.
Right.
And that's just a preliminary assessment. And then later in the year, a fuller assessment. So he'll be, I'm sure, willing to receive constructive suggestions from anybody in the college community.
Great. Well, so I mentioned new campuses and security. That kind of leads me to one of our big things we've got happening that I don't know that everybody's as well aware of it as they maybe should, or we would hope, at the School of Public Safety. In the old CJI location near East Campus, where I usually am. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's happening there? Joe Batista has been leading some work you asked him to undertake and has got a wonderful team around him. And they're unveiling, maybe even when people watch this, it will have already...
Not quite, but close. So don't tell anybody we told you this. About 2.5 years ago, we were approached by the fire chiefs in Central Florida who were aware of the high degree of satisfaction that the police chiefs and sheriffs had with our Criminal Justice Institute. And they said, we really want something like that. We don't just want basic training. We want something that moves our men and women to a higher level of professionalism and raises their educational expectations. We want everybody to be degreed. We want everybody moving towards professionalism in these roles as they evolve. And we spent a lot of time sort of making sure that was their interest, that their interest aligned with our mission, and in the end decided it did. So we took responsibility for the Central Florida Fire Academy, Fire Institute, about 1.5 years ago, and launched an online degree program for fire science that allows them to move through that wherever they are in the region. They still do their own in-service training, the sort of live burn stuff and that sort of thing. We may do basic fire training from time to time, although most of the firemen that are hired are not hired out of basic schools. They're hired from other agencies here because they're able to. But advanced training and in-service training and degree-based training and moving them towards degrees in things like public management and leadership and IT-related degrees or security-related degrees or medically-related degrees. Those are the directions they really want to grow. So we absorbed them into the same organization that houses the Criminal Justice Institute. When we moved our human resources functions out of that building, they moved in and we renovated for them. And then we began to look at the larger challenge to our community and said, you know, there really is a bigger thing at work here, and that is the whole world of security and homeland security is causing a need for deep integration and collaboration across all of these emergency services platforms. All the municipalities, all the police, all the fire, all the EMS, EMT, and so on. And they really need to come together somewhere and find that synergy. And we asked them if we were a logical place for that, and they have agreed.
Great.
So we've been in a planning process to create a larger mission for that than just fire training and police training. And it will be called the School of Public Safety, and we'll have a growing portfolio of degree and non-degree programs, grantsmanship, collaborative programming. It'll have state-of-the-art simulation facilities, both for the command and control part of their work as well as the direct services that they provide. It'll have connections to our existing degree programs in criminal justice and EMS, EMT, and so on. Won't take them over, but we'll have deep connections to them. And we think we can create that synergy together. So this will be the first time we've named something a school of. True. And that may raise some questions deeper in the college. And we're all wrestling with those too. We may need to think about other areas in which those synergies and connections with the community argue for an organizational structure that's a little different than the traditional academic department, and rename them and brand them and staff them a little differently maybe. So that's exciting. I think it's a big value proposition we're making to the community. We're here for your safety, not just for your training.
Is there a timeline for when we hope things will roll out, or is it just happening as we go along?
I'm hoping that we will be briefing the board for their approval of the big plan early in the fall.
Great.
And doing a public rollout late fall or early spring.
Super. You mentioned the fire is online. And so this past year, we have another consultant who came and joined us and, in the online education world. And Dr. Ledlow has been kind of managing that in her work, and maybe even by the time this is come live, maybe there's been some other announcements. But just in general terms, can you give us an update on where that is? I mean, the online teaching thing, going back to the questions we had about enrollment and about learning, I know at times for some of my peers and for myself, if I could wave a magic wand, I probably wouldn't teach online. And yet that's the world we live in, and there's access issues. And like the firefighters, they can't come to us. They need to be out there protecting us with fire, and other people have those issues relative to managing their lives and their work and pursuit of education. So online's here. We're not going to not have it. And yet there's challenges in the issues of quality, academic integrity, access, managing it, and all that's, I think, probably encapsulated to some degree in the consultant's work and Dr. Ledlow's work. So can you, there's a lot of tales there. I didn't give you one good question, but.
Okay, let me just talk a little bit about it. In the early part of the last decade, say 2000 to 2005, a lot of work was done to train faculty, develop curriculum, strengthen a platform on which we taught, all those sorts of things. And we made a lot of progress in online learning. We made a big strategic decision, and that was we're not going to have a separate unit that does all of our online and then do all of our on-ground in the regular campuses. And we did that because we thought our online students and our on-ground students needed the same professors, and the professors needed both sets of experiences. So online grew. It grew more in response to specific demand from students and interest from faculty than according to some big strategic plan.
Correct.
It grew to over 20% of our credit hours. And that realization just a couple of years ago led us to say, you know, it's probably time to step back and say, are we doing what we want to do? Are we doing it with the quality we want to do it? What resources do we need to commit to this to do it the way Valencia would want to do it? In what disciplines and what courses, with what support for students and faculty and so on. And so a first step at that was just to bring in fresh eyes, because we've been buried in it for a long time.
Okay.
And so we hired a consultant who had done a lot of work with the Florida Virtual School and had great reputation, and said, take a look at what we're doing and just tell us what you think. And she spent some months doing that and brought a report forward. And that's available to anybody that wants to read it.
It's online.
Yeah, it's on the website. When that was reviewed by a pretty large team, 60, 70 people looked at it and said, okay, some of this stuff that she noticed we've noticed too and are already beginning to respond to. We got work in progress. Other areas is kind of greenfield for us. So they made a decision to put some work teams together to focus on components of the report, and there's several of those work teams working. Again, all that's on the website to find. I can't give you specific updates on what they're all doing.
Well, let me ask you a couple of questions. So you said early on we made a decision that we would not have a separate unit. Is that still our opinion?
Yes.
Okay. So there's not going to be some announcement of a school of online learning or a college of online that's going to have its own separate leadership. We're going to still do it the same way we've been doing it, where a faculty member like myself may be teaching in both modes of delivery, and even including hybrid, a third option.
Yes, yes. And I don't think anybody's going to be compelled to teach a certain amount that way. I think what you want are people teaching who want to do it for whatever their reasons. But we have already made the decision that as a part of the tenure process, you got to get digitally certified. You have to know how.
Right.
And so that's been added to the tenure process. Here's what I would say about the study and our response to it generally, Carl. The study revealed, in subsequent conversation revealed, there's a significant appetite in the college for raising standards.
Yes.
And how you raise those standards is, that's the challenge of the collaborative work. But we needed to raise our expectations for what's taught online, who is taught online, and who does the teaching online, what evidence we have of success online, what tools we support it with, and finally, coordination across campuses, because even something as simple as scheduling created all sorts of problems online. So you had an unconnected scheduling process producing too much capacity in one area and not enough in another, and so on. So figuring out how to have the freedom for departments to do this work, but in a coordinated way, just like a lot of other challenges at multi-campus colleges,
right.
Is in the middle of this too. So I think we decided, no, we don't want to have a separate online college, but yes, we do want more coordination of online within the college we have.
So we should expect that to see both from how I experience what I'm asked to teach, what am I given as my classes, as well as people like myself who are discipline chairs, managing, there's going to be more coordination.
I think so.
What about the student side? Sometimes it feels like we could do more in student readiness, but then when you tie that into open access, it becomes, in my opinion at least, a little challenging. I know there's some work going on with that. Are we going to be pushing for changes there as well?
I think so. There's a lot of appetite for some sort of a digital passport that says of a student, you're ready now to do this. I think the NSE, New Student Experience course, lends itself to helping students discern, am I ready to do this? Do I have the credentials to do this? I think you're likely to see standards that involve how you deal with students who are serial, non-successful in a serial way in online classes. So I just think it's going to be a little more structured, a lot more coordinated, and our expectations of one another, what we bring to an online experience, are going to be higher. Not that they're lax now, but we've kind of outgrown the model we developed almost 10, 12 years ago.
All right. Got time for two more?
Sure.
All right, just want to make sure. Don't you get...
They can always watch this and compress and skip.
Don't you get worn out here.
That's right.
So,
fast forward if you're bored.
Yeah, and hopefully not. Hopefully not. Well, so a big change that we've been working on for years is with our instructional materials. And we just rolled out this past year under Deidre Holmes DuBois' leadership as the association president, obviously working with the team, a new policy. We worked on it, worked with Bill Maloney and everybody who's responsible for our policy. And we have a new instructional materials policy. And in those conversations, I know one of the pieces that you were really focused on was wanting to set structures in place to protect faculty from any hints of impropriety relative to faculty-authored materials. We consistently face pressure from the state, both in legal means from a sense of just laws that they pass, or at least the regulations perhaps that come to the different decision makers, as well as auditing. Relative to cost of textbooks, that seems like a big hot item for people. So are you happy with the policy we have now? Do you feel like we've gotten in a good direction? Are there other things we should be aware of relative to textbook challenges that are going to come our way?
Well, let me say two or three things about it. One is thank you. That's hard work to do, and it's faculty work, and so when those issues were on the table, we said this really has to be something the faculty association and faculty council take on as the leaders of policy, developing new policy in this area. And so both you and your predecessor, Deidre Holmes-Dubois, and her predecessor,
Bob McCaffrey.
That's right.
And Bob Gesner, he was
Bob
working,
Gesner.
Lisa Macon was working on it back when she was there.
We've had 4 or 5
yes.
tenures in this role in a row where they've all been working patiently, carefully towards a policy that, that's as fair or balanced as it can be. We're in a weird time in the industry where sourcing content's kind of in between. We're not fully liberated to an open content world yet. We still have publishers to deal with. Marketing and fulfillment is still kind of complicated. Prices are all over the place. So it's an odd time in what we would have called the textbook world just a few years ago, but the instructional materials world. And so nothing's going to work perfectly. But what you developed, I thought, was procedurally thoughtful. It allows faculty to make the decisions, but not individually. The curriculum is owned and controlled by the faculties, including those materials. But faculty is a plural word, not singular. And we have obligations to one another. And we've got to create an environment that's sensible to students. I think the time will come when digital technology will free the faculty to have many more options about instructional materials to use. And that'll challenge us as well.
Right.
But for now, at least, we have to attend to both worlds at once. How to create that flexibility and openness to content that's going to come from all sorts of sources and still protect the traditional environment of the textbook so that people, aren't being killed by textbook costs that are just outrageous, frequent changes of editions, whether they're needed or not, all the rest of that stuff. And I think one of the issues was we have a number of faculty who are very good scholars and are producing good text material, and I want to make sure they're able to do that in a way that doesn't put them at risk. And that means peer review is a part of what they have to do.
And when you say at risk, I mean, I think I understand what you're saying, but just for a few more seconds, what kind of risk could they be at?
Well, more than once, I'll say honestly, in my career as a college president, I've had to go to the mat either to protect or to deal with a faculty member. They're rare, but they're problematic when they happen. But a faculty member whose choice of materials came out of self-interest rather than interest in the students.
Okay.
And the whistle got blown. And it has happened in my tenure at Valencia. It's not the main reason to do all this.
Sure.
We'd need all this even if that wasn't possible. So I want to encourage faculty scholarship, but in a way that says you're like Caesar's wife, above reproach.
Right.
And I thought y'all found, it's not perfect, but you found a good balance in being able to do that. And some faculty author materials have already been through the process and approved, and everybody's solid. And some have been through the process and not approved. I'm sorry. Keep at it.
Right. It's not like they can't try again and make
Sure.
the changes that their peers suggest. But when we talk about auditing, I will even admit my own ignorance. I know that Andrea Stalling is our internal auditor. But we hear about, the state's going to audit us, or maybe the state's going to dictate one textbook to us, kind of a thing. Are those real issues, or is it just people scare tactics? Or fearful words?
Yeah, you can overdo it, but it's real. They did pass in proviso language a year or two ago requirements about textbook affordability at colleges and universities, and all the universities and colleges funded by the state of Florida have been struggling with this. Yes, we are audited, and the auditors tend to take views that go beyond the letter of the law. They're interpreting the law too. So yes, we get audited. No, they don't understand why in a single course we might have 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 different textbooks being used, with a variation in price from free to $250. And
so, and just to make sure I get this right, they're working from some rule that, at least the auditor's position is, that shouldn't happen.
Yeah, they're interpreting affordability. I mean, that's a bad management practice if you're trying to make, as the legislature has required you to make textbooks more affordable. You can argue with them about whether their interpretation is right.
Nonetheless, the state is coming in saying, we have an opinion about the textbooks you've offered, like in my subject history, and we're looking at them, and do we feel like you've met the law? So if we get audited and I guess get on report or something, we're in trouble. What does that mean if we're in trouble?
Well, it can mean a lot of things. They can require you to follow up with reports to the State Board of Education. They could withhold funding. There are all sorts of
So there could
measures.
be financial penalties
Sure.
if we were not working to get our textbooks in some kind of an alignment. You think our policy is okay relative to the state rules?
I think they're in the same quandary of this sort of strange environment with regard to where content comes from that we are, and so they're struggling to master it too, albeit with a little bit of a simplistic approach to it. And I'm perfectly willing to defend against auditors and occasionally take an audit finding when I think we're right and they're wrong, and have said that to them as well as others. So I don't think we need to be overly sensitive to the auditors in this. I think Valencia's always been good at choosing the right value.
Right.
And the value here is we want the best material at an affordable rate so that students can afford to do this in a way that the faculty as a community of intellectual leaders have deemed as appropriate. And so we've pulled you together. You pulled yourselves together, built a policy. We're going to follow the policy. I will say that we discovered along the way that even the policies we had were often unknown to some faculty or had not been properly followed over the years, maybe even kind of a wink and a nod about it, and that's just not acceptable. We either have a policy that's real or we don't. Playing games with it doesn't work for anybody. Puts everybody at risk.
All right, last question. We just have a few minutes left. Tolkien's movie starts off, The Lord of the Rings, with Gladriel, the elf, saying, "The world has changed. I can feel it in the water, feel it in the air." It feels like our world has changed. And as you are very well in touch, as you said, traveling around, and you think about challenges and changes to our culture relative to higher education, to our work. I mean, this is my job, my career, my profession. I want to be here for another 20 years. What do you see on the horizon for us that we should be aware of or concerned about or just staying alert to?
That's a good question. The big national conversation beyond higher ed, that is the sort of large policy conversation that concerns higher ed, is over a term that's being thrown around called disintermediation. Yeah, it's a big economics term, and it means really that many are foreseeing a day when institutions are superfluous and all that the institutions represent, like full-time employment and faculty governance and all the other things that make the institution what it is, and that you'll have the all-powerful consumer sort of clicking and dragging courses into their own degree programs. They'll all be from big branded institutions, and they'll create their own credentials and badges, and industry will love it, and it'll drive the prices down, and quality will be really high, and cost will be really low, and access will be really broad, and so forth and so on. That's the big discussion. It's blind to many realities. I mean, it's important for us to recognize we're not alone. When I was your age, well, when I looked your age, there were about 3,000 colleges and universities in America. Now there are almost 6,000.
Wow.
And many of them are very different from the colleges that I knew as I was growing up. So yeah, there's a lot of change in the environment. Mostly that's been about expanding who has access to higher education, what kind they have access to. But some of it's competition. Here's the core to cut to the chase, here's the core I would say. All our institutions, not just higher education institutions, but every kind of servant institution we've created in Western society is under stress right now. And many feel almost abandoned. Hospitals, schools, colleges, universities, social service agencies. And I think their legitimacy is being questioned. But I think the question isn't about technology or competition or markets. Those are potential solutions. And getting the question right is the most important thing here. Here's what I think the question is. Can we, at scale, serve unique human beings in ways that don't depersonalize them?
That's good. That's good.
If that's the right question, then the answer to that is that all those other tools and things that people are talking about have to be put in service of personalization. The only the only legitimate definition for authentic human service is to render a unique response to the unique person in front of you. When you begin to treat them as equivalent units or numbers or the magnetic strip on the back of their card or, in our world, FTE, or just another problem to be solved, or just another whiner at my door, or whatever other ways we might depersonalize. When we go there, we're inviting disintermediation. Okay? If you're going to treat them impersonally, they might as well have an impersonal solution. Our future is in finding out how to render that unique response to every human, to be deeply personal with every person who comes to us. And that starts with one another. If we treat each other in dehumanizing ways, we will not treat our students in humanizing ways. So the challenge that I find Valencia has always stepped up to well is this personal challenge. When I talk to students and they tell me what a wonderful place this is, and I say, what's so wonderful about it? They usually tell me a story about a person.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. Again, as you said to us earlier, you're open to anybody's email and reaching out. You're often busy, so sometimes it takes a while to get back, but you're not trying to dodge anybody. So hope you found it informative. Feel free to always email me if you're a faculty member or anybody else for that matter. But certainly Dr. Shugart is here for us. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you chatting with us.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right.